Done moving yet? Charles, my father-in-law, mutters without even glancing my way. He doesn't address anyone by name, but I know he's talking to me. His voice carries that same condescending tone, as if the whole world revolves around him. I've tolerated it for too long, but today, I've had enough. I stop wiping the table, shooting him a sharp look. He still won't meet my eyes. I'll be out by the end of the day, I reply. He chuckles, smug and satisfied. You were always a parasite, nothing but garbage. I'll finally feel at peace once you're out of here. He probably believes that everything will return to normal once he's rid of me, completely unaware of how much his life has shifted over the years. My name is Grace, and I turned 40 this year. I've been married to William for several years, living here with his parents. We don't have children, never planned on it, and now we can't even if we wanted to. I realized that shortly after our wedding. I met William at a party. Looking back, if I'd known he was infertile from the start, I might have thought twice before marrying him, but I didn't find out until the night we signed our marriage papers. I can't have kids, he said, casually, as if it were a minor inconvenience. I remember feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. We'd talked so many times about starting a family, imagining what our children would be like, even picking out names together, all of it, meaningless. To be fair, maybe it wasn't entirely a lie. William probably did want kids, despite knowing it was impossible, but that, in itself, felt like the deepest betrayal. I had married him, believing we would build a life, a future, a family, together. In reality, I'd been deceived by the man I trusted most. Some women might have filed for divorce right then and there, but for me, it wasn't that simple. I had already promised to be part of this family, his parents included. They were the only parents we could claim. Telling them we were divorcing just a day into marriage was unthinkable. Still, the inevitable question from his family came, when are you having kids? So, we told them the truth, except, we put the blame on me. We said it was my fault we couldn't have children. The moment they found out, my father-in-law exploded. A woman who can't bear children is worthless, Charles spat, demanding I leave the house. From that day on, I became nothing more than a servant in his eyes. Since I moved in, I've never been treated with an ounce of respect. I eat alone in the kitchen, never joining them at the table. Even if I prepare a meal for the family, all I get are the scraps they leave behind. No matter how carefully I cook, how hard I try, my food is tossed aside. Charles would dump plates of food in the trash without tasting a bite. Looks disgusting, he'd sneer. Neither William nor his mother, Madison, said a word in my defense. It wasn't always this way. Before I came along, Charles took out his anger on Madison. Now, I'm the one who bears the brunt of it, and she seems grateful for the shift. Mom's been smiling more these days, William once remarked. It's no wonder, Charles has turned his attention from her to me. Around Charles, she keeps her head down, but with William, she seems lighter, even cheerful. Since learning we couldn't have children, Charles also insisted I pull my weight. If you can't be a proper woman, at least be useful around the house, he barked. It wasn't that I didn't want to work, on the contrary, I preferred it to staying under his roof. So, I worked, managed the household chores, and tried to be out of the house as much as possible. But no matter how hard I worked, I remained invisible at home, even as I exhausted myself doing everything for them. The only conversations during meals were the silent exchanges of contempt. I often wondered if they really enjoyed this cold, joyless routine, but I endured it, convincing myself I had no other choice. After all, I had no parents of my own, nowhere else to go. Divorce felt like an impossible burden. So, I played the part, the dutiful wife, the obliging daughter-in-law. Even though inside, I was crumbling, I kept going, because what else was there to do? Then Charles demanded that I hand over all my earnings to support the household. I had planned to contribute some of my salary as living expenses, but all of it? That was absurd. What's the point of working if I have no control over my own money? But there was no room for argument. Charles's word was law. Protesting wouldn't change anything, and it was easier to comply than to face his wrath. It spared me the gloomy expressions of Madison and William, who had long accepted Charles's domination. At the root of all my problems in this marriage was Charles. Madison and William weren't the real issue. It was Charles who tormented and oppressed me. Madison used to manage the household finances, but that duty fell to me once I entered the family. Isn't this too much for Grace? Madison would occasionally suggest, only to be dismissed by Charles with a sharp, shut up. In his eyes, neither of us, neither Madison nor I, had any worth. To him, we were just women, and that meant we had no right to opinions. When I first took over the household finances, I was horrified. The disorganized, reckless spending was overwhelming, but over the years, I adjusted. Having one more breadwinner only made Charles more extravagant. It's for work, he'd claim as his late-night outings increased. Weekend getaways, once unheard of, became routine, just for the three of them. Of course, I was never invited on these trips. My role was purely that of a live-in servant, never a member of the family. Charles never let me forget my place, calling me a parasite or trash at every turn. In his mind, I was just an unpaid housekeeper, there to keep things running smoothly without costing him a penny. In my 20s and 30s, I'd found ways to cope. convincing myself that it was easier when he wasn't home. But now, as I approached 40, I couldn't tolerate his behavior any longer. The fear that once silenced me had vanished, and I started to push back. Naturally, Charles hated that. He grew more hostile, and the tension between us escalated. Conversations became rare, and when he did speak, it was only to insult me. I no longer held back either, snapping at him in return. The atmosphere at home grew unbearable, and eventually, he began demanding that I leave altogether, but I refused to be dismissed so easily. "Where exactly do you expect me to go, Charles? You know I have no parents," I'd retort each time. His temper would flare, and more than once, I saw him slam his glass down in rage, shattering it. "He's broken so many glasses that I've lost count. Why should I care where you go?" he'd roar. "A woman like you has no right to talk back to me." Madison and William would quietly leave the room, eager to avoid the storm. Once Charles reached that point, there was no calming him. "You don't appreciate the privilege of staying under my roof. You're nothing but a parasite," he'd continue. His face flushed red with anger, sometimes even more so than when he was drunk. We've had this exact argument hundreds of times, circling around the same bitter insults. I was tired of being yelled at. Usually, I would cave and mutter an apology, "I'm sorry," but that day, something snapped. "You better stop saying things like that, Charles. You're not getting any younger. Maybe it's time to calm down," I shot back, my voice sharper than usual. Charles, caught off guard by my defiance, was livid. "Who do you think you're talking to? I'm the master of this house. A wife like you has no place expressing opinions." I knew I'd crossed a line, but the words just poured out, driven by years of pent-up frustration. "I've been your wife for years. Don't you think I deserve to be treated like a human being? You're retired now, living off a smaller salary. Looks like the tables are turning, don't they?" Once I started, there was no stopping. I faced Charles head-on, matching his anger. He exploded. His face contorted with rage as he grabbed me by the collar. "A woman like you is worthless in my house. Pack your things and get out, right now." He roared so loudly that the furniture shook, shoving me away with enough force to knock the breath out of me. I should have apologized, but I was too far gone. "Fine. You want me gone? That'll make you happy, right?" Charles, glaring at me, spat out, "Yes. Then I'll do it," I snapped back. He stormed off to his room, slamming the door behind him. I stood there for a moment, catching my breath, then started cleaning up the mess he'd made in the living room. Madison peeked out of her room, worry etched on her face, but she said nothing and quietly retreated. It was clear to me that once I left, Madison would be Charles's next target again, but I had no place here anymore. Neither she nor William would stand up for me. The next morning, I woke up early, like always, and started my daily chores. Charles shuffled into the living room, sat down heavily on the sofa, and unfolded his newspaper, acting like the previous night's outburst hadn't happened. Without even looking at me, he muttered, "Finished moving yet?" I paused, wiping the table, realizing he was serious. "Are you still going to leave, or was that just talk?" he added, never lifting his eyes from the paper. I turned to face him, my heart pounding. "I'll be out by today." Madison, standing in the doorway, froze, her eyes pleading with me not to go. But Charles had made up his mind, and any hope of staying was gone. The option to apologize and continue living here had never really existed. Charles chuckled, smug, as if victory was his. I stormed upstairs, quickly packed my things, and left the house. I didn't know where I was going, but a strange sense of relief washed over me as I walked away. I texted William, "Please divorce me. A lawyer will contact you." Then I turned off my phone. Over the next few days, I found a lawyer and had them reach out to William and the in-laws. Charles, eager to rid himself of me, pressured William into signing the divorce papers without delay. William hesitated, glancing between me and the papers, but Charles's glare silenced him. The divorce was finalized, and I knew there was no going back. Charles, ever the cheapskate, grumbled, "I don't have money for a woman like you, but dealing with lawyers is a hassle, so I'll pay." He said this arrogantly, using William's money, of course. The lawyer smirked at Charles's attitude. William seemed reluctant but eventually signed the agreement under his father's watchful eye. I signed in front of the lawyer, and with that, the divorce was done. I had expected this and prepared. I had recorded Charles's years of harassment, which earned me a decent settlement. He hated public exposure, so he caved quickly once the lawyer got involved. Managing the household finances gave me an advantage. I knew exactly how much Charles had. That's why I could propose an amount he could afford without putting up too much of a fight. The property distribution and harassment settlement allowed me to start over comfortably. I moved into my own apartment, enjoying the peace I never had in the in-laws' house. Living alone, something I used to dread, now felt like a blessing. I cooked for myself and savored the quiet, with no one to complain or make demands. About 3 months after the divorce, Charles started calling me incessantly. I ignored him at first, but his persistence wore me down. When I accidentally answered one of his calls, his voice came through so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "What have you done to my house?" he bellowed. I raised an eyebrow, unsure what he was talking about. "I haven't done anything, Charles. I left the house, just like you wanted." But Charles wasn't satisfied. "Why am I getting notifications that withdrawals can't be made since you left?" It hit me. He was furious because he was being denied access to his usual reckless spending. I couldn't help but smirk, glad he couldn't see my face. "That's not my problem, Charles. I managed everything like you asked, and I paid all the bills before I left." "That's impossible. Before you came, we managed fine on our own. How much were you even earning?" I'd never told him before, but now I couldn't resist. $45,000 take home, I replied casually. He made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a croak, then fell silent. In truth, my job was in sales at an investment trust company, and most of my income came from commissions. Though Charles had drained much of it over the years, I had quietly invested an inheritance from my parents, which provided a modest, steady income. That money was mine, untouchable by him or anyone else, and wasn't part of the property settlement. Charles had no idea. He just hung up, fuming, and I went back to enjoying my newfound freedom. Life without the constant storm of his anger felt like a rebirth. Since I had poured all my earnings into living expenses during our marriage, I had no savings to fall back on. For years, the Charles family had spent money like it was water, oblivious to the fact that I had been compensating for their excesses. "You said you managed just fine before we got married, but was it the same standard of living?" I pressed, watching as Charles's face began to redden. "Don't joke. You need to keep contributing to the household. You're the one who ruined everything, so you should take responsibility," he spat. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of his words. The sound of my laughter only fueled his anger. "What's wrong with you? You told me to leave, remember? I did exactly that. Why should I, no longer part of your family, give you any money?" I shot back, half amused. I heard something break on the other end, a clear sign that Charles was throwing yet another tantrum. The thought of him making a mess that I no longer had to clean up brought a smile to my face. "Besides, we're strangers now, not family, not anything. So stop pretending we're still connected. Manage your own finances. I left you just enough to live, right?" With that, I hung up, feeling a sense of liberation wash over me. I expected more calls, but none came. Maybe he was feeling remorseful, or perhaps he was just too ashamed to face me. What I later learned was that he couldn't make payments on his own and had started ordering William and Madison to borrow money from financial institutions to cover their costs. Payments were being made, but it only led to mounting debt. Unwilling to change their lifestyle, they continued living as if I were still there, maintaining the same extravagant standards. But living that way while struggling to meet regular payments was a recipe for disaster. Each month, they found themselves accruing more debt. I heard about their struggles when William contacted me, pathetically suggesting reconciliation. "I'm cutting ties with Dad," he said, his voice a mixture of desperation and hope. "Let's get back together." How could he say that now after he had never stood up for me against Charles's harassment? I had stayed with William, fully aware that we couldn't have children, but he had never once protected me. I had no intention of going back to him. If he felt suffocated by Charles, that was no longer my problem. I wished they would come to understand the consequences of their actions and suffer the fallout. Now, the in-laws were drowning in debt, unable to lower their standards of living. Charles had become a contract worker with a reduced salary, and both Madison and William had taken part-time jobs in security. It was a family affair. They were all feeling the strain, yet they refused to simplify their lifestyle. Where once I had desperately tried to protect William, I now focused solely on myself. At 40, I understood that having children might be a challenge, but I remained open to the possibility. Before the divorce, waking up each day felt like a burden, but now I woke up refreshed, filled with hope and anticipation for my new life. I looked forward to a brighter future, one I could shape for myself.